Welcome, welcome. Hope you all love our song. I am looking at where everybody is coming in from, and it looks like we are definitely coast to coast, up and down, and sideways. So this is great. It is wonderful that you all are here with us this evening. And we are thrilled tonight to bring back the team from Mindbridge. They joined us in September to teach us how to use neuroscience and psychology to build bridges, reach people, and create connections. We had amazing feedback from that session. And so we were thrilled when they offered to come again tonight to talk about the psychology behind extremism. Now, this presentation will take about an hour, and after that, we're going to have an after party for those who want to stick around to have questions answered. So if you have questions tonight, please drop them in the chat as we go along, and they will be gathered and we'll ask them at the end. Mindbridge is the nation's leading nonprofit using brain and behavioral science to empower human rights defenders. As a diverse group of activists, scientists, clinicians, storytellers, and humans, they conduct programming, support partnerships, and direct research at the intersection of psychological science and human rights. Through these efforts, Mindbridge is growing a science-driven community that gives human rights defenders access to the hearts and minds of those they serve. So we have Andrea and Christine here tonight, and I'm going to have them be brought up. And we're going to take me off the screen and we're going to have their presentation.
All right, thanks for joining us tonight. It is so wonderful to see everyone. I'm going to riff a little bit while I get my screen share going here. But I think last time that we were with you all, we topped out at 615 participants, I believe, and I have seen this counter just tip over 1,000. So we are thrilled to be back with you. It's wonderful to see so many of you here with us. And to see your introductions from all over the country. I hope that if you're in an area that's been impacted by the winter weather, that you are staying safe and warm. I want to give a special shout out to my mom and to my husband who are on the call tonight. They're both people who sustain me in difficult times, encourage me, and remind me that I'm loved. We're going to be talking a lot tonight about division. And so I wanted to invite you, if you're joining in with someone or with a group of people or simply carrying someone with you in your heart tonight, feel free to share that in the chat as a part of your introduction. So thank you again for coming together to spend your time with us tonight on this important topic. We are in the midst of a very challenging time politically, and we're here to try to meet that challenge head on, but we're also going to try to give you some space for whatever you're bringing with you in this moment. So we're going to do a couple reflections, a structured reflection at the beginning. If you've got a piece of paper handy, if you need to go run and grab a piece of paper, that'll be helpful for doing that reflection exercise. And then at the conclusion, we're going to close this out with some more reflection. In the middle of all that, we are going to tackle the academic research and draw some connections between our current political environment and what we know from a research standpoint about authoritarianism, extremism, and the psychology of radicalization. So my name is Christine. I'm a social and community psychologist, and I am the scientific content expert with Mindbridge. My co-facilitator tonight is Andrea, and you'll be hearing from her a bit later in this presentation. We're thrilled to be back with Red, Wine, and Blue. Thank you for inviting us back, and we are so appreciative of the wonderful partnership and the energy that you all bring. Andrea, would you give me a thumbs up so I can make sure my slides are showing? Thank you. All right, Mindbridge, who are we? For some of you, this might be your first time. If not, if you've seen us for the second time, welcome back. We're happy to be here. Mindbridge is the nation's leading nonprofit using brain and behavioral science to empower human rights defenders. Our organization is dedicated to transforming the impact of human rights and social justice work through psychological and neurobiological science. We have three pillars to how we do this work. The first is that investigate pillar. We conduct original research and compile cutting-edge psychology and brain science research to bridge the gap between science and those who most need it. We then apply this research through strategic partnerships with local, national, and global organizations in order to build more effective and far-reaching interventions. And finally, we provide workshops and seminar series providing education on the psychological and neurobiologically informed approaches that catalyze change. In 2026, Mindbridge will be celebrating 10 years as an organization, and we've had the privilege of working with partners across 6 continents. Along the way, we've learned a lot about social change and civic engagement, and we've been gathering the most effective methods and distilling cutting-edge insights from around the globe to apply to our communities here at home. I want to take a moment to highlight two of our projects that might be of particular interest to this audience. The first is the Implicit Bias Project. In this, we provide a synthesis of the literature orienting the discussion on the growing extremist sentiment within the United States. We then explore the path of de-radicalization, highlighting lessons from clinical psychology and methods that might be effective to intervene in our communities. And the second project comes from our Countering Extremism directive. It's called From Tradition to Extremism. We use significance quest theory, which you're going to be hearing about in tonight's presentation, to explore the life experiences and psychological pathways that motivate conservative women to engage and perpetrate far-right ideologies. And both of these can be found on our website. Look, we'll get you a link. Maybe Andrea can drop it now. If not, we'll be sure that we grab that for you all. So as we come into this space together, I wanted to take a moment to share our community commitments. We share these at the beginning of every presentation to set up how we want to engage together in our virtual or in-person spaces. So take a moment, I've got these up on the screen, read through them, maybe pick out one that speaks to you in this moment. And I'll share the one that's currently resonating with me. And that is at the one in the bottom right corner there, expect and accept non-closure. As humans, we all want certainty. We want to resolve ambiguity. It makes us feel safe when we feel like we understand the world. And we're excited to share with you some information tonight that we hope will bring you closer to that understanding. But our world is dynamic, nuanced, and complicated. So as we inch closer to understanding, it might also open up new uncertainties. And we might need to practice sitting with that feeling of not knowing it all. So that's the commitment that I'm carrying with me. And I invite you to choose one and carry that with you throughout our time together tonight. All right. So before we dive into our content, if you could grab your piece of paper, we're going to take a moment to ground ourselves in the current moment. So on your piece of paper, it doesn't have to be large, just any scrap that you have close by if you want to tear a page out of a notebook. I'd first like you to draw a vertical line and then a horizontal line through the middle of your piece of paper. Then, starting in the middle where your lines cross, you can start drawing a tight spiral. It can go out as far as you want it to go, but leave a little room to write in each of the four sections that you've just created with your crossed lines. It should look a little bit something like what I have up on here on the screen. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's just a guide for how we are going to think today. So I'm going to give you four reflection prompts, and each one is going to go in one of the sections that you've created. We're going to do these one at a time, and I'm going to give you all about 2 minutes to sit with each one. This is your private reflection. We're not going to be asking you to share, so feel free to freely write whatever comes to mind to you. This is your time and your space for reflection. So first, pick one of your quadrants, doesn't matter which one, and write down your answer to the following. Right now, it seems. Okay, so we're going to move on to our second reflection question. Our second prompt is something that's been on my mind today or over the past week. Our third prompt is something that I am learning to live with. Something that I am learning to live with. And the final question to write down on your paper is, during all this, I am leaning on. All right, these are yours to keep. You can add to them throughout the presentation. You can revisit them today, tomorrow, whenever feels right. Anytime that you need to check in with yourself in your present. So we are going to move forward now. Our overview of what we're going to cover today. So we are going to start with how authoritarianism gains ground. We're going to start with how division and dignity stripping work as a part of the authoritarian playbook. And then we are going to go into significance quest theory to explore the psychological vulnerability that results. And finally, we're going to turn toward a way forward. So I introduced myself to you all as a social and community psychologist. That means that I'm very interested in how people interact in social groups and how our communities can strengthen our collective well-being. What I've got up here on the screen to ground us is a socio-ecological model. This is a framework that's used to understand how a person's behavior and well-being are shaped by the world around them. It spans from the individual level, that's our own thoughts, our internal beliefs, and it goes the whole way up to the public policy and the level where broad cultural values are defined. Now, the socio-ecological model is powerful because it shows that to solve a problem, you have to work through all levels or across multiple levels at once. If you want to change something like violent extremism, simply telling someone to stop is not going to solve the problem if their interpersonal circle encourages it, if their institutions allow it, and if the political environment endorses it. So in the first part of this presentation, we're going to explore that top level of authoritarianism and how it flows down to the individual level of extremism. Let's start by defining some terms. So starting with extremism. Extremism is a belief system that rejects compromise and embraces radical, often absolutist views to achieve political, religious, or ideological goals. It often justifies harmful or violent action to defend identity, belief, or belonging. Some key features are black and white thinking, dehumanization of opponents, And though extremism can be violent or nonviolent, today we're going to be more focused on the violent actions that can result from radicalization. Importantly, extremism grows in conditions of identity threat and humiliation. And authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a governing system or mindset that centralizes power and demands obedience, often by suppressing dissent and dismantling democratic checks and balances. It rejects pluralism and institutional accountability, and it prioritizes control over consent. It weaponizes fear and division. So there are two more interconnected topics here. Oh, I just changed my view accidentally. Power and dignity. So first, power. Power is one's ability to shape our life and our environment, our agency and our sense of control over what we're doing and how we're operating in this world. And dignity is our inherent sense of self-worth and being able to be seen as a moral equal. Together, they form the foundation, the bedrock of what we call psychological resilience, which is what we turn to and what we lean on to get us through the tough times that life may throw at us. Systemic indignity fosters alienation and helplessness. Once people lose faith in their sense of place, their institutions, or each other, they become more vulnerable, more susceptible to strongman narratives, even if those promises come through exclusion and control. People can feel so ashamed of being treated poorly as if it reflects their own self-worth. So authoritarianism meets a human psychological need. We all want to understand, we all want order, but it does it through distortion. It does not solve insecurity, it frames it. It doesn't restore dignity, it reassigns it to only those who are deemed worthy. We've all probably felt this deeply as we've remained politically attuned and engaged. And on the next slides, we're going to offer a few examples of how this has operated over the past year. But we'd also like to invite you to continue the discussion in the chat and to lend your expertise toward uncovering all of the ways that this is impacting different communities right now. Our examples are not meant to be exhaustive, but rather to give a common groundwork for discussion. Andrea, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. All right, so as I get started, I just want to take a quick moment. I'm going to be going over three examples, which you can see on the slides. And as I move through these examples, I just want everyone to really take note of how you're feeling in the moment. If you're feeling overwhelmed, angry, sad, all of the emotions, um, I'm probably right there with you, or I am right there with you. But really, what I want to point out, and very importantly, is that it's okay to step away from the computer if these examples land too hard today. It's okay to mute me. It's okay to grab your spiral reflection and keep writing and just kind of tune out for a moment. So please just do what you need to take care of yourself. And I can't see anyone, but I'm going to assume we're all nodding because we all are going to take care of ourselves in that moment. So, I'm going to be talking briefly over a couple of slides about the kind of the policy level. So looking at the systematic dehumanization and how that relates to authoritarianism and extremism. So over this past year, we've seen systematic and structural dehumanization carried out through administrative policy, and it's reinforced through language and culture. And so this erosion of dignity that's occurring is not incidental. In authoritarianism, it's a governing strategy that normalizes cruelty, fragments solidarity, and makes control feel reasonable. So all of this allows authoritarianism to flourish or to take hold. And it really lays the groundwork for the more widespread acceptance of extremism that Christine will talk about a little bit more soon. So I'm going to show how this works through these three examples. Again, please take the space if you need to. So first we'll look at the targeting of trans communities. Next, we're going to look at the dismantling of reproductive health care and then immigration. So on the next slide, we're to look at the targeting of trans communities. Dehumanization here is used deliberately to expand control and normalize extremism. So in December 2025, Congress passed the Protect Children's Innocent Act, which I'm sure many of us know about. So it's going to be a bit of a recap for some, but this bans gender affirming care for anyone under 18 and threatens providers with up to 10 years in prison with just a few exceptions. And so here in this example, evidence-based medical care is reframed as harm and identity itself is treated as a threat. And so at the same time, we also see federal guidance removing words like transgender, non-binary, gender diversity from research, data collection, public programs. And so at the administrative level, this is seen as erasure. And when language disappears in our programming, the recognition and protection disappears with it. So these policies are also paired with moral framing where trans people are cast aside as dangerous to children, morally corrupt, all of these terms that we're hearing to describe humans, people, leading to this idea systemically that trans people are undeserving of autonomy or care. And this is classic authoritarian tactic. Invent a social threat, exaggerate it, and then use fear to justify or control it. And so this isn't a side effect of this isn't a side effect, really. It's really a mechanism. And so cruelty is really recast as protection, punishment becomes common sense. And then once a group is framed as a threat, harm against them no longer registers as harm at all, dehumanization. Next, we have the reproductive health policy and some of the shifts that have occurred over the past year. So here in this example, we're looking at autonomy as disciplined and cruelty as normalized, which again lays the groundwork at a structural level for control. So we saw this year in late 2025 that Congress advanced legislation that banned federal abortion funding, restricting administrative support for abortion-related care. And this also had clauses that allowed employees and providers to refuse contraceptive care on ideological grounds. So, under this framework, reproductive health is no longer essential, it becomes conditional. At the same time, we saw Title X funding being frozen, which was the sole source of funding for 8 states in our country, meaning that clinics that provided care well beyond the scope of just abortion, that provided contraception, STIs testing, cancer screening, all sorts of preventative care, were either forced to shut down temporarily, permanently, or cut services. And the impact reports have shown that 800,000 people lost access to care, and dozens of clinics have since closed permanently as a result of this, and also largely as a result of Medicaid reimbursements being stripped from abortion providing funders. So again, we see at a policy level that we're not simply reducing services here, we're destabilizing entire health systems through these shifts. And so when funding is withdrawn and care is politicized, clinics collapse, staff is laid off, infrastructure fails, and this harm stretches far beyond abortion, which is often the main focus of some of the rhetoric, and instead punish people who rely on basic preventative care. So the budget isn't really the dispute or the issue. It's again that dehumanization by design, autonomy being reframed as something that must be earned, and suffering treated as something that's acceptable policy. So once the denial of care is normalized at a structural level, increasing restrictions become easier to impose. So again, it just lays that groundwork. Cruelty becomes administrative and control becomes routine. And this last example, before we even switch to it, or before I even get into it, again, I just want to acknowledge what is happening right now in this moment, presently for many of us here. So again, if you need to step away, please do so. So finally, we have a slide on immigration, and we put it in quotes because we as a team felt like we couldn't even really call what's happening right now, immigration, the shifts that are occurring. So this example shows that how immigration policy is being transformed into a system of surveillance, violence and militarization, exclusion, and again, control. So over the past year, the administration has done a lot. And again, what I'm talking about is not exhaustive. I have about a minute or two before Christine takes over. So we know that a lot has happened this year. A lot has happened in the past month. A lot has happened in the past week. So when we look at some of these structural changes, though, the administration Just to name a few, the administration suspended immigrant visa processing for dozens of countries, overwhelmingly impacting Black and Brown populations. There are expanded travel bans nationally, and this turns nationality into grounds for exclusion so that mobility becomes conditional. Enforcement, as we've seen, has escalated dramatically. ICE now receives tens of billions of dollars to expand detention and deportation, while operations explicitly frame people as targets to be caught rather than humans that are entitled to dignity and due process. So the language being used around this by the administration as well, around these operations, for example, the names of the operations, how they're speaking about the human beings themselves, enhances dehumanization and prepares the public to accept harm. So at the same time, legal immigration itself is also being criminalized. USCIS, the agency responsible for citizenship and legal status, is now authorized to carry firearms, make arrest, and so that collapses boundaries between civil process and law enforcement. So as advocates are currently warning, this process is creating a system redesigned to strip status rather than grant it. So asylum and green card processing has been frozen. We could go on and on, right? We could keep listing things. And so all of this is not immigration policy. It's conditioning. It's authoritarian conditioning because when legal status becomes fragile and identity becomes a liability, eventually extreme enforcement may no longer appear extreme. It may appear necessary. And so all of this is done with purpose. And so on the next slide, we can see that across all these cases, there's a central theme. Dignity is removed to enforce submission. Removal, whether it looks like defunding, deportation, data erasure, creates psychological chaos. Yeah, so that's a lot, right? A lot. Even just saying it, I can feel kind of myself becoming elevated. So just, I'm inviting you in this moment to just take a deep exhale with me because a lot of this content is very upsetting. And so just as we continue to go through this, continue to tune in with how we're feeling because Christine is going to take back over. And rather than look at just the structural, while it all interrelates, Christine's going to share more about the psychological elements with us and bring us then into a bit of what we can do about maybe all of this and all of that we're feeling. So Christine, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for taking the time to talk through those examples, for carrying the weight of that and bringing that new information into our space together. So now that we've talked through authoritarianism, we've talked about how it creates destabilization, how it's currently operated now. We're going to zoom in and talk about what happens on the individual level, through talking about what happens psychologically, and we're going to use this lens of significance quest theory. So first, humans are not just social animals. We are ultra social animals. We survive and have thrived by forming and maintaining groups. And that means a lot of our innate psychology and not a lot of our biology is geared towards maintaining our groups. We understand innately that our survival is linked to our group's survival and our well-being is related to our group's well-being. As humans, we all also crave significance. That means a sense of mattering to someone, a sense of purpose, and a sense of belonging, all of which we achieve through our groups. So what happens when those evolutionary needs, when our sense of belonging gets altered by efforts like humiliation or what we refer to as significance loss? So take for a moment, reflect just on your mind. You don't have to put it in chat if you prefer not to, but take a moment and imagine that you've just faced a personal setback. Maybe you experienced losing your job. Maybe it was a bad performance review at work. Maybe a group you wanted to join didn't work out. Maybe it's an unexpected medical issue. Maybe one of the political actions we just covered is impacting you or a loved one personally. What are the first feelings that come up as you grapple with this, as it first occurs? We're not going to spend very long here. For most of us, that first feeling is some version of bad, right? I think I saw in the chat the word disgusted. There's a lot that comes up for us when we grapple with these feelings. It might be shame or a sense of humiliation. You might be questioning yourself, questioning how to find your way forward, or even maybe briefly feeling like a failure. Now, take for a moment, what does it mean for you? What does it take for you to move on from those feelings? What do you draw on internally or externally to get past that feeling of bad and to get to something better? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of things coming in the chat that are referencing community and connection and social support. So keep those in mind, and we're going to think about those as we now think about the psychological theory of significance quest theory. The researcher here is Ari Kruglansky. The citation is from 2022. And this is going to put some terms to what we just imagined and thought about in our minds. So in significance quest theory, it starts with a triggering event. This could be a personal setback, a social rejection, or a threat to collective identity. And that results in what we call significance loss. And that is that feeling of struggle with meaning, with feelings of insignificance, and all of those bad feelings that come up when we first encounter that triggering event. So significance loss doesn't just end there. Significance loss can tip over into driving individuals to seek meaning and to restore their self-worth. And in the case of radicalization, this happens through identifying a grievance and assigning blame. So when people feel a loss of significance, they might target others. They might target a racial or marginalized group as a source of their distress, which leads to hostility, racism, and other forms of discrimination. And this becomes ingrained over time as a pathway through which hate and intolerance can grow. So we're going to look at this next to the 3N model of radicalization. 3Ns are for need, narrative, network. Starting at the bottom there, there's a psychological need. That loss creates a vulnerability and a need to restore our feeling of significance. The struggle with meaning and self-worth can foster an opening to groups or ideologies that promise a renewed purpose and validation, which sets the stage, lays the foundation for radicalization. In the middle, we have the narrative. So radical groups and ideologies can promise a clear sense of purpose and community. Individuals can be given a role and a mission that they can then use to get their sense of belonging back and to reinforce their own commitment to the group's goals. So we see the individual goals and the group becoming linked through this process. And finally, that's solidified at that top level of network. Extremist ideologies can provide a network of others, a community of others that positions themselves as the answer to personal grievances and the answer to restoring significance after the significance loss. They offer a means to reclaim respect, honor, and self-worth, although this is through that damaging lens of grievance and dehumanization of others. So to wrap that all up, extremist ideologies become solutions where people find their influence where previously they felt as though they had none. So this becomes even more poignant when we think about the current state when mainstream news sources might not be trusted as much. Online groups can provide an easy method, not just of disseminating information, but for scaling their message and overtaking our traditional credible news sources. They can also provide that sense of community for people who might feel marginalized or disconnected. This can become even more powerful in times of social isolation, like we all experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this sense of belonging is essential for individuals who have experienced significance loss by validating their grievances and giving them a place to turn to. But in turn, this community connection is reinforcing extremist ideology, further isolating from neutral or positive influences. So extremist groups offer not just an ideology, but a social network that becomes difficult to break away from. So there's a second part to this. We've seen how authoritarianism can create the situation where vulnerability can be easily exploited, and we've seen the psychological pathway, but there is a part two. And that part two is the significance quest. So anytime there's a significance loss, we then enter into a significance quest, a motivational state where we're trying to reestablish our feelings of personal significance. And in the model that we've discussed, this can lend to radicalization. So the quest becomes particularly dangerous when the path to restoring one's perceived significance is in a society that is built upon a framework that justifies discrimination and violence against other groups as a means to restore or enhance the significance of your own group. Throughout most of our lives, most of us are going to experience some form of this significance loss. But why do some people turn to radicalization? It's part of this design put in place by authoritarianism, the creation of vulnerability, and then limited options for restoring significance, which exploit that vulnerability. There we go. So authoritarian systems are responding to the loss of personal significance not by offering solutions that restore autonomy or equity, but providing redemptive narratives that transform personal grievance into collective mission. Humiliation is not resolved. It is reframed to continue to oppress those who are humiliated while saying that there is space for those who are not being oppressed. The narratives might be like, they don't belong versus you are a part of something. As a result, violence, this could be psychological or physical, becomes framed as our way to moral restoration. So whether it's lone actors or large movements, humiliation is often the emotional root of retaliatory violence. People don't see themselves as aggressors, they see themselves as protectors, and repression is reframed as righteousness. Cruelty becomes a civic duty, and people engaging in this form of action often receive praise. And this creates a cycle of positive reinforcement to further motivate people to engage in those kinds of actions. So we've been through a lot here. Just to recap here and to frame it all, conditions of perceived threat and anxiety, if this is a real or perceived crisis, make people feel vulnerable. That vulnerability leads us to seek out safety and strong structures, but that appeal of authoritarianism can quickly turn to divisive control through limiting freedom and centralizing power. To consolidate authority, leaders might turn to amplifying us versus them narratives and further fostering division. And the pursuit of security through authoritarianism can lead to coercion and violence to enforce compliance. All right, it's my turn to take a deep breath. I'm going to inhale and invite you to do it with me if you'd like. And exhale. We've covered a lot of content, but we want to use the rest of our time with you here tonight to talk about a way forward. So I'm going to bring us back around to the socio-ecological model, the same model that I showed you at the beginning of this presentation. We've examined now what goes on at the individual level with vulnerability to extremism, and at the authoritarian level, how that perpetrates psychological vulnerability through interrupting and destabilizing pro-social pathways to significance. But how can we interrupt that flow? So just like when I prompted you all to think about what you do when you face a significance loss, this is a highly human experience that does not need to end in radicalization. And we know that we also have a very special and passionate and engaged audience here with us at Red Wine and Blue. So before we present our ideas, I'm going to turn it over to you and get some conversation in the chat. What are the pathways to significance that don't follow down the path of authoritarianism and violent extremism? Think about yourself, think about your friends, your loved ones. How do you help them in these turbulent times? I'm going to give you just a moment to drop your comments in the chat. I'm going to look through a couple of those and then we'll continue on with our ideas. These are wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing these ideas. Yes, I'm getting so much energy and excitement from all these. Please keep going with this. I'm going to move us along and share some of our ideas, which overlap with a lot of what you all have been sharing. But feel free to keep going with those. So, what can interruption look like? I'm going to start at that top level, that public policy level, calling and writing to our representatives in Congress. I know Red, Wine, and Blue just put out a call to action on Sunday night. So you've got a link in your email that you can probably click to contact your senator right now. We can also exercise our First Amendment rights. We have the right to freedom to assemble and freedom of speech. We can run for office. There's a lot that we can do at that top level. Within our communities, an important thing is cross-pollinating between community initiatives. So we can sometimes get stuck with just who we know, what we're used to, what we're comfortable with, but we can amplify our impact when we go between initiatives and work in coordination with others to make sure that we have the greatest impact. This can include raising public awareness about issues and making sure that our community organizations are well resourced and ready to support everyone. At the institutional level, when we talk about institutions, we're talking about schools, workplaces, the institutions that we belong to. So a few thoughts here are inclusive curriculum, workplace transparency, ethical and equitable protections. Maybe this looks like advocating for paid parental leave within your workplace, within your settings. Or if you're in a large workplace, this could even look like joining or supporting an affinity group. If you're in a workplace of thousands, finding those people with whom you can really connect and form a deeper relationship. At the institutional level, we also can talk about local politics. So going to your town halls, engaging in local government and municipal elections. At the interpersonal level, I saw a lot of comments about this, and these are wonderful suggestions and ideas, but supporting those closest to us with direct action. What does your neighbor need? What can you bring to someone that will help them out? Is there a way that you can help kids get to school safely? There are lots of things that we can do here to be good neighbors, to be good family members, and good friends. I saw a lot of people mentioning listening with empathy, engaging in those critical conversations. All of that is so important at our interpersonal level. And finally, to mention online spaces, intentionally finding positive influences in online spaces. Maybe that's following diverse creators, breaking out of your own little bubble, and seeing who you can engage with to broaden your perspectives and have some more positive influence in our online content. And then finally, the whole way down at the individual level, a lot of this work can begin internally through developing our own critical thinking skills, our media literacy. I'll even say in this day and age, AI literacy, trying to figure out what is and isn't real is a skill that we can develop, and fact-checking skills alongside that. Imagining possible futures, developing our own emotional regulation skills, and reframing and interrogating our beliefs to identify what might be harmful and to fix it within ourselves. All right. And with all of this, I also wanted to mention that we intentionally presented this across a lot of different levels because we know not every fight is accessible for everyone. There are very real safety concerns in this day and age. And so if this one isn't for you, that's okay. You can operate across different levels, and the rest of us can be there to step up for you. All right. So let's not wait any longer. Let's get started on some of this. We're going to close this out with a reflection here. If that text is a little hard to read on your screen, it says imagine a better world. So at Mindbridge, we talk a lot about imagination, and imagination is a political act. And we talk a lot about it also because research shows that vividly imagining helps create our reality. When we vividly imagine where we want to be, what we want to do, we're better positioned to create that future. We're better able to deal with setbacks. We can overcome a lot more. So we all know that that we are not currently living in the reality that we want to be in. We want to be in a world that is safer for everyone, that's more inclusive, that has more humanity. So to get there, like we talked about, it's going to be a lot of different pathways to change. We need changes in our policy, in our communities, in our culture. But to work towards these, we first need to vividly imagine the world that we want to live in. So as a final piece of reflection, if you want to grab the back of your piece of paper, if you want to put it in chat, if you want to just close your eyes and think about it, We're going to spend a minute on this question, which is what do you envision for the future? What do you hope for? What do you and your community need to move toward that future? So I'll repeat those one more time. What do you envision for the future? What do you hope for? And what do you and your community need to move forward toward that future? And I'll give us a moment here to reflect. And you're welcome to put those in chat or to just reflect internally. These are some beautiful reflections. Thank you for sharing those. I'm going to move us forward and I'm going to share some of our reflections from our team. So I've introduced Mindbridge as focused on psychological and neurobiological health. So one of our imaginings for the future was a future where we have institutionalized psychological safety. So by psychological safety, we mean the ability to express emotions, to be heard and valued across our institutions, wherever we might show up, to be able to show up as our full selves. So a few things that might feed into that we can imagine are trauma-informed policy, making sure that our policies are equitable and account for different experiences, whether that's childhood trauma or current trauma, that we are supporting people and moving them forward. Equitable public services, making sure everyone has access to the services that they need, and not just access, but that they are able to be delivered to them in a method that is congruent with how those people need them delivered. So if that's coming to someone to deliver healthcare, that would be someone who can't easily leave their home. That would be an example of equity in public services. And finally, inclusive narratives. So getting rid of narratives that say that certain people or groups of people are limited, whether that's by race, gender, or any other distinguishing characteristic, and making sure that we are all equally uplifted and valued within our culture. All right. And as one final reflection, we want to call everyone into this to defend dignity. So dignity we think we see as an antidote, not just de-radicalization, but re-anchoring. If we are anchoring on dignity, we are affirming everyone's worth, voice, and safety. So dignity isn't an abstract thing. It lives in our funding priorities. It lives in the way that we recognize identity and the way that we protect truth. So when dignity is upheld, we envision a future where people are less susceptible to manipulation and can participate with full agency in our democracy. All right, and with that, we will take it onto our Q&A section. If you all have to duck out, thank you for spending some of your time this evening with us. If you can hang around, then we will try to answer some of your questions in the Q&A session. And I think I'm turning it back over to Julie to facilitate that.
Yes, and we have quite a few. One of the things that I don't know if you all were able to notice because you were presenting, but there is a lot of love and caring that has been expressed in the chat, and to me, that's very, very hopeful. But a lot of folks had questions about who gets radicalized and who falls for the are there specific like personalities that fall into this trap of authoritarianism? Is it men? Who are the folks who, you know, are just like, I guess, easy pickings?
This is a wonderful question because it is so complicated. So let me see if I can tease out just a few threads of that. So generally, yes, men have more of a propensity towards violence and therefore towards violent extremism than women. Um, that's socialized. It's not biological. It's something that's socialized in the way that men are within our current societal frameworks. So it's something that we can change, is the great news there. So that's not a hard and fast. That's just a current trend. Um, there is some really interesting research coming from my perspective on age and the we call it the age crime curve. And the age crime curve is actually later for people who engage in violent extremism than it is for people who engage in other types of violence. So people, we might think of beginning to engage in violence as something that happens when people are younger, more impulsive. But for violent extremism, it's actually peaking, if I'm remembering correctly, around 25, 26. So there's a later onset of that, meaning that this is people who weren't previously violent. They have found an ideology and therefore they are engaging in violence on behalf of that ideology. So there's a really interesting thing there within the research. And then you mentioned personality. So I'm going to mention some burgeoning research on conspiracy and personality. There's a ton of work being done on this currently. I cannot speak to all of it, but some of the most recent work shows that perhaps there is a link between narcissism and propensity to endorse conspiracy beliefs. So, narcissism is a personality trait. We all have a little bit of narcissism. Some of us have more, some of us have less. And personality can also fluctuate somewhat throughout our lifetime. So once again, it's not a hard and fast, but it's just a few things that might set people up that might be at play here.
And then
So,
just to add
oh,
one
go ahead.
more, couple other personality traits that we sometimes look to for people who have a propensity towards adopting extremist thinking is we see people who have high cognitive rigidity, so kind of rigid thinking and black and white thinking as kind of falling prey to extremism more. And then also people who are might be drawn to extremism might prefer tradition rather than and like have less openness towards new experience. There's a lot of research out there, and it's yeah, as Christine was saying, definitely pretty complex. But those are some of the defining character traits that can doesn't mean that they will lead towards extremism, but that people who have kind of those personality traits might kind of be encapsulated by extremism more.
Someone asked the question, have you interviewed many former extremist or radicalized people? Because they happen to have been one. Um, is that something new that you all are working on, or is that something that you've already done?
I can answer that based on my past experience. In some of my prior work, I was working on interviews. I think we got up to 47 people. I'd have to double check that number. Let's say 50 as a nice even number. Interviews with people that were life history interviews, so 6 to 8 hours in length. Those transcripts were 75 to 150 pages. And I read every single one of those. So that's where a lot of my former experience comes in terms of numbers and amount of content. Um, yeah.
When you were talking about how folks get, radicalized, how folks get involved with the extremism, someone asked, a couple of people actually did ask if this is how gang members are actually also recruited. Is this very similar? Is it the same?
That is another fantastic question. There's been a lot explored there on the similarities. There are some similarities, though that age question that I just pointed out is where they really starkly divide. So gang recruitment typically starts much younger, even with children or adolescents, whereas violent extremism, though we've seen some really compelling, like some scary examples of it happening within young people. On the whole, it is happening within an older population. So if you just think cognitively, the way that we're thinking about issues as an adolescent versus an adult is different, and that makes the pathways just a little bit different. But it's a great question. That's where a lot of the research started from, was saying, hey, what are the similarities? What are the differences between these two?
Someone said, I know I need to celebrate incremental step-by-step change, but it doesn't feel good. How do you better frame it and deal with it in terms of the incremental change?
It's a great question. I can only answer for myself, but I think that we might have individual ways here. But I would say even the fact that the person asking this question has broken it down and said, like, okay, I'm noticing incremental changes. Try to celebrate that, like that, from a goal setting perspective. The more we can break our goals down and take small slices towards that big goal, the better that we'll do psychologically, the more resistance, persistence we'll have in meeting it. So it's a whatever that looks like for you, if that is as tiny as you can make it is the best thing. If y'all don't mind, I'll share one that was something for me that was a small incremental change. So I recently got to listen to an interview with a lawyer who was in the Supreme Court for the recent case regarding the trans athlete, the high school athlete in West Virginia, arguing for inclusion of trans girls in sport. And this lawyer observed that even they had been in court previously in front of the Supreme Court, and they observed that even if this case doesn't go their way, the way that the court was asking questions and responding to the trans girl in the courtroom was different. There was no misgendering, that it felt respectful. It did feel like there was a sense of dignity there. And so for that lawyer, that was the small win, the incremental change that they were hanging on to in that moment. So we talk about this in our Mindbridge work as signals of change. So grasping onto those small pieces that can start to shift the narrative, that you can say, hey, maybe this possible future that I've been imagining is coming into being through seeing this small step, and stack up as many as you can and hold them tight when times are hard. But I think it's individual and it's a difficult thing for sure.
Well, someone else said, I have tried to be patient and curious with some of my extreme relatives and friends, but it feels like I've made no progress after 5+ years. It just gets worse, making me feel unsafe and unseen. Should I keep trying to be neutral ground to help them grow or just give up?
I am always going to say prioritize your own safety. Your safety is important. You can make a difference. Like if you are not safe, like we need you. I need you. I don't know who you are, but we need you to feel safe and to be able to stay in this with us. So prioritize your safety. And maybe for you, this looks like getting a buddy, getting a friend, getting someone else that you know can stand beside you, that you can say, hey, I can't do it today. I can't be their neutral sounding board today. Can you step in? So build up your own support system around you, making sure that you're safe, and lean on others. It's going to take more than just you, probably, if you've been working at it this long, to get that person out. So see who else in their network is important that you can have as an ally and to advocate alongside you.
Well, I think in many ways this didn't happen to their friends and family overnight either, even though some days I think it probably looks like that. But I don't think that that's necessarily true. So it's just like with dieting, it isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, and sometimes that's extended time.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fantastic, Julie. And I think for the person, it can feel like it can seem fast because it's new and exciting, right? And so for them, it's like the next chapter, something new has opened up before them, and they want to go quickly down that path. Just like you said with dieting, if you found like the miracle diet that was going to work, you'd be like, all right, let's go full steam. But coming back and like returning back to the pace of normalcy, that can feel that's going to feel weird for them. So they're going to need some time to adjust back, to let their brain even adjust back to the normal pace of how things are moving. Especially when we're all, in some ways across the aisle, we're all looking for change. There's a lot of dissatisfaction that's going on right now. We might disagree about how to get there, but
mhm,
there's
mhm.
there's a sentiment in the air, and we want that. We want that urgently. So how can we take these incremental changes and build upon them to move forward?
Um, how long should you maintain relationships with extremists, and when should you walk away?
I don't think there is any one answer to that. Once
Mhm.
again, I'm going to prioritize your safety. We need you to stay safe. So if at any point that looks like your psychological safety too, if you are continuing to be in relationship, grab your support system, whatever that looks like. If that's friends, family, therapy, make sure that you've got that and that you are well taken care of first and foremost.
Okay. Are authoritarians intentionally doing this? And I would say yes, but here the experts tell us. Hold
I
on
would agree.
one.
Andrea, do you have anything to add on to that?
I would agree as well, but I will say that if somebody had a differing opinion that maybe they don't agree it's entirely intentional, I would hear that out. But I think from what we've seen right now and the conclusions we've drawn, I would agree with that.
Okay, I don't know what I did to mess up my camera, but I did. Sorry about that, y'all. It seems that fear drives so much of the division. How do we deal with fear in us and in others?
These are fantastic questions. So I think confronting what we are afraid of can be very challenging. But getting down to that root of what is causing it that's what can actually help us to move forward from it. And so going through that thought process of what am I really afraid of here? And is it tolerable for me to sit with this fear, to get through it and to get past that root cause of whatever is going on?
This is a great question here. So, what about those without family or close friends? Where do they find outlets for their disappointments?
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to talk about online communities as kind of a double-edged sword. Because here we are with red, wine, and blue in an online space together, and it has been fantastic and so supportive and a source of a lot, like you pointed out, Julie, a lot of joy and kindness and empathy. And so online spaces don't always have to be the bad version of it, but you do have to be attuned to what you're getting out of it and what kind of other people or sentiments or narratives are going around in your online space. So I think that's one answer. And in fact, for a lot of teens or kids from marginalized backgrounds, online spaces might be where they see someone who looks like them, see someone who acts like them, thinks like them, and they can get a tremendous amount of social support. So just being mindful of what we're getting out of our online community. If it starts to feel bad and yucky, like step back, put that timer on your phone, whatever you need to do. But also, it can be a really wonderful, supportive place, a place to learn about who needs aid, how to engage in direct action. Lots of good things can come too.
And I would
I would also,
also, oh, go
go ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say I would offer up for folks to go to our website, redwine.blue, and look up our Trouble Nation groups. There's an interactive map there where you can click on your state and in your area to see if there are groups that are with like-minded individuals that you might be able to connect with as well, and start to build your tribe.
Yeah, and I just to add to that, for me, sometimes I also like to look at like the hyper local nonprofits that are doing work that I believe in, because a lot of the more, I mean, national organizations are incredible too, like Red, White, and Blue, who are hosting all of these events all over the country. And for me, a lot of the local nonprofits have maybe meetups or online spaces that they get together, that can feel sometimes small. I know for me, I have a nonprofit like right in my town that have like little meetings that you can go to, and there's usually like 10 people chatting. So I would say also look for small local nonprofits too.
Mhm. Um, Someone asked a question, does educational level matter? I heard that 50% of ICE could not pass an open book test.
Christine, do
Oh,
you know this one?
this is another tough one to speak to. Because it's not so much educational level as it is that education oftentimes exposes us to a variety of viewpoints and builds up critical thinking skills. Oftentimes, not always. There are people at all different levels of education who have those skills, who have learned them through family, community groups, and all kinds of other ways. But as a generalization, as a way overgeneralization, to the extent that education gives us those skills, yes, there is a correlation, That's not, I wouldn't say that's the causation. The causation is that ability to handle ambiguous or conflicting information, to be able to be tolerant of different viewpoints and tolerant of ambiguity. There's some things underlying there. Another really good question.
Well, and it's interesting because the question underneath it was, what is the technique to persuade an intelligent person who believes anti-vax pseudoscience? So, complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Oh, wow. Okay. On the other end of the spectrum, I think for there, if we're calling them an intelligent person, I don't know what that means exactly. That maybe that means that they have formal education or not. I would start looking at what are the sources that are compelling to them? Where are they going for their information? And is there a way that you can add just a little bit of friction into that? If that's just pointing out something small, it's probably, like we've talked about, probably not going to be effective to swing them the whole way back to mainstream information. But just start adding a little bit of friction and start asking them questions about their sources, about how they know what they know, and see if that can create some critical thinking about it.
And then I also often think like the who the messenger is. If it's a trusted in-group messenger who's relaying the message, it's received more readily by people than if it's a message coming from somebody who they are already putting up a wall against, already opposing, already somebody in the out group. So sometimes looking for some sort of in-group authority that might be able to sway some thought, if that's possible, can also can be a valuable source.
Um, have you studied violent extremism on the left? Are there any differences? Is the development process the same?
An excellent question. Um, so on the left, when we're talking about engaging in violent action, um, it is similar, and this is where we, I almost hate to bring it back around to this, but this is where we see an educational divide. People who engage in violent extremism on the left oftentimes do have more formal education than people who are engaging in extremism on the right. But the process is fairly similar across both of them. This model doesn't discriminate. It's describing human behavior, and the ideology that drives it kind of is irrespective to that. So we're describing tendencies that exist within all of us as humans rather than things that are rooted in political ideology.
Is there any common theme to what breaks the thought pattern or provides the crack in the thinking?
So I can try to speak to this one again as well. So it depends on who you're dealing with and what kind of you know where they are in their process of radicalization. But oftentimes we have to think about this as a change in identity. So just as closely as you hold an identity that is meaningful to you, this person is holding that identity for them. And so to break away from that, it has to be replaced with something else, right? You can't just give up a part of yourself and feel whole again. So you have to be filling in that crack. So the I'm trying in a kind of meta way to point to the thing that might make the crack is showing people that another role, another identity, another pathway exists for them. And that's going to be, like we've talked about, incremental and just a piece at a time, and doing that imagining of possible futures that we've all done together. So, thinking, helping them think what might exist beyond this for me as a first step. What might it look like to move away? And there are some great organizations that are doing hands-on work with people like this. I'm going to shout out Project Exit USA. Is working with getting people out of groups, and so they have specialized experience there and would be the most helpful resource.
There are a couple of folks who have asked about a relationship between trauma and the radicalization. Is there a relationship between the two?
So again, we have to go back to correlation and causation. So trauma is not causing extremism, but we might see histories of trauma more often because it's creating psychological conditions that our extremist ideologies can exploit. So it's not the cause, but it is a correlate. It is something that is happening alongside and creating a vulnerability that is then carried forward throughout that life.
Are there books that you would recommend that folks can read to learn more about how to dismantle authoritarian control?
I'm
I'm
going to
pulling
name
up our reading list. So we do have on our website, we do have, and in our newsletter, which you can subscribe to on our website, we do have regularly updated book lists for many current event topics, including these. And so shout out to Emily who works on that on our team. Christine, if you have anything to add directly in the moment, but we can definitely send our book list and some resources along.
Yeah, I'm going to add just one that's been influential for me over the past year, which is Doppelganger by Naomi. I mean, I always get the wrong one. Naomi Klein is the correct Naomi. But the book explores her relationship and the duality of her being mistaken for Naomi Wolf, who is another formerly feminist scholar who has gone down the alt-right pipeline. So it is a really fascinating exploration of our current political moment, particularly like what is happening in online spaces. So again, that book is Doppelganger, if anyone is interested in that.
Okay. And then finally, someone brought up social media being a powerful tool. Do you have suggestions for how to use it to get people to stop participating in extremist groups? This person had a leavingmaga.com as an example, but are there other groups out there that are successful in um, getting folks to stop being in these groups?
I'm gonna take this question in a slightly different direction, and then maybe Andrea can come around and actually answer the question. But I think we need to have a really important conversation in our country about Prop 230. So that is the proposition that makes individuals rather than platforms responsible for the content that is posted on them. So that gives platforms a lot of immunity in saying what they can leave up and what they can take down, or like not taking immediate action when harmful content is posted. And that includes things like exploitative materials about children. There's lots of things that fall under this conversation about Prop 230. So to take it at that large level in our socio-ecological model, at the public policy level, I think we need to grapple with that and to figure out who is responsible for what content is propagated in our online spaces. And let me see if Andrea has a real answer to the question that was actually posed.
I unfortunately, we look, I think on the flip side, as an organization, we look a lot into the research and do research on the mechanisms driving people in online spaces towards extremism. So looking at the manosphere and certain groups like tradwives. And so I don't actually have like the antidote yet because we're doing a lot of the research on why it's happening and trying to work towards developing interventions. So I don't have anything to contribute there, but we do have more info on kind of the we're working on understanding more of the psychological mechanisms of how social media is impacting.
Well, and one final question. What can we do to disrupt the chain for children? I think a lot of us are very concerned about kids and them getting, you know, involved with these groups, and then, folks aren't finding out immediately. What are signs maybe to look for? What are ways to, disrupt that, while they're young and in those teen years?
So that is a fantastic question. I'm going to point toward research from the Polarization, Extremism Research and Innovation Lab at American University. Happens to be my alma mater, but that's beside the point. I wasn't involved in this work. But they have a fantastic resource that recently came out called Not Just a Joke. And I think this is a trend that we're seeing among young people is everything has kind of become satirical in a way. And so it's hard to know what to pay attention to or what to be concerned about. But that resource is providing guidance for people who care for children, guardians, parents, about how to start addressing the bigoted beliefs that might be underlying the joke culture. And
Mhm.
so it's a nuanced and complicated conversation, but I think increasing your own understanding of what is happening in the online spaces where kids are spending a lot of their time, and what is normal versus what is tipping over into a more discriminatory or a pathway that could lead to the normalization of the harmful beliefs is really important. So that's one resource that I would definitely point to. And also just affirming them and uplifting them. They need that sense of belonging and significance, just like adults. So making sure that you are working with your kids to find where they fit in, where they feel like they matter, if that's at home or in a sports group at school, if that's within a religious organization, making sure that they have those pro-social relationships and that they can engage with their communities.
Well, do you either of you have, or both of you have, any final words for us? Something that, some marching orders, if you will, of what we should be doing. What should we do tomorrow when we get up? What's one of the things that maybe we should be doing? I know you spoke a lot about taking care of ourselves and making sure that we are safe. And I just want to reiterate that I believe that you meant both physically and mentally. What's something that we can do tomorrow, that everyone on this call, because everyone on this call has been very caring and very loving towards one another, and we all want to see we all want to see this be a better place.
All right. So I love goal setting. As a psychology person, I love goal setting. So my marching order for everyone tomorrow is to set one goal, one for, as you mentioned, Julie, how you're going to take care of your safety, both physically and psychologically. Make it a SMART goal, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. So decide how you're going to take care of yourself in this moment. As I've said a couple times, we need you. We need everyone's voice. We need everyone to be well and with us. So I'm going to say set one personal goal for how you're going to take care of yourself, and also then set one goal for how you want to engage further to build out what you want to do and what impact you have. And again, try to make that one specific. You might need to spend a little bit more time on that, but two small goals is my marching orders for tomorrow morning.
Wow, so beautiful, Christine. You are incredible. Mine was, even if you scroll back in the chat so far, just looking at what a lot of people said, something that really stuck out to me that people are already doing and are mentioning as their supports is being in community. I think that interruption of isolation is key. Finding a place where you can be in community with those around you is so powerful right now, and it's powerful to build the resilience, the psychological resilience that we need to get through what's going on right now. So places you can build community and affirm dignity, I think, are key right now.
All right. Well, I want to thank the two of you, for both of you rather, for being here tonight, answering our questions, sharing with us all of the information that you did share, and you've certainly given us a lot to think about, um, and some good information on how we might move forward, and great ideas for what we should do tomorrow. So again, thank you very much for coming, and thanks all of you for being here and asking great questions and caring for one another.